In this lesson, we're continuing our discussion of criminal homicide. Specifically, we're going to focus on involuntary manslaughter. So, at this point, we've discussed big picture, step by step, the flow of the criminal homicide analysis. We've broken down what common law murder is and how common law murder can be mitigated down to voluntary manslaughter, which really takes us to the last offense we need to talk about in the common law criminal homicide analysis, which of course is going to be involuntary manslaughter. And we'll see involuntary manslaughter kind of sneaks into the analysis under depraved heart murder and the felony murder rule, right? It's going to be just below those two things. If we think back to our 4 mental states that can get us to malice aforethought, remember we had the intent to kill, the intent to inflict grievous bodily injury, and then we had reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life, which was depraved heart murder, right? Remember that was still malice aforethought, common law murder, and then we had that intent to commit a felony under the felony murder rule, which we said was also malice aforethought, common law murder. Right? We'll see involuntary manslaughter kind of sneaks in under depraved heart murder, reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life, and kind of sneaks in under the felony murder rule, right? With this idea of misdemeanor manslaughter. So if we're going to define involuntary manslaughter, though, we can say involuntary manslaughter is the unintentional killing of another human being committed with criminal negligence or during the commission of an unlawful act that is outside the scope of the felony murder rule. Otherwise, sometimes we hear this called misdemeanor manslaughter. Right, so we can just break this down, right, with these two elements. So the first thing to recognize with involuntary manslaughter is it's an unintentional killing. So if our defendant has the intent to kill, we're not really thinking about involuntary manslaughter, right? That's malice aforethought, common law murder. Right? So the first thing we need is an unintentional killing. As always, step 1, we'd want to make sure the defendant is the actual and proximate cause of the victim's death. That's how in our head we can kind of say, okay, that means the defendant did kill the victim, right? The next question when we're thinking about involuntary manslaughter is whether that killing was unintentional or intentional, right? If it's intentional, right, we're thinking malice aforethought, common law murder, right? That's not involuntary manslaughter. But if it's an accident, right? We have an accidental or unintentional killing of another human being, right? We're going to ask, well, was this committed with criminal negligence or during the commission of an unlawful act that's outside the scope of the felony murder rule? So what is criminal negligence? Right, criminal negligence involves a gross deviation from the standard of care reasonable people would exercise in the same situation. Right, so it's best to think about criminal negligence and involuntary manslaughter, right, as a spectrum, right, a spectrum of negligence, if you will. If we think about kind of the varying degrees of negligence a person can have, right, at the very bottom of liability, we might have tort negligence, right? We all remember, this takes us back to Paul's graph, right? The Long Island Railroad, a whole different course, right? When we're thinking about tort causes of action, right? When we think about the negligence cause of action in torts, right? That's maybe our lowest form of liability for, acting in a negligent manner, right? That results in some type of harm to another person, right? Tort negligence, we would just say, is a deviation from the standard of care reasonable people would exercise in the same situation, right? This would be something like, we all know what tort negligence looks like. You're in a parking lot, you're slowly backing out of a spot, you don't look behind you and you slowly back into a pedestrian and that pedestrian sprains their ankle, right? And then they have to go to the doctor and they have $1,000 medical bill as a result of the sprained ankle and they're suing you for $1,000 to recover the cost of that medical bill, right? That's the type of tort negligence we're thinking, right? It's just, you're moving slowly in a parking lot, you should have looked behind you, right? A reasonable person when they're backing out of a parking space, checks behind them. So you did deviate from what a reasonable person would do in that situation, but it's not a gross deviation, right? As we move up the spectrum to get to criminal negligence, we need something far more gross than that. We need a major deviation, a gross deviation from the standard of care reasonable people would exercise in the same situation. Another important note to make, to get to involuntary manslaughter, remember, we need a killing of a human being. This is not a requirement in tort negligence, right? Somebody sprains their ankle, sprains their back and has a bill from the chiropractor or the doctor, whatever, even small amounts, small damages, you can still be liable for tort negligence, right? To get to criminal negligence and involuntary manslaughter, remember, we need a killing of another human being. So a human has to die in order to be liable for involuntary manslaughter, right? And beyond that, beyond just needing, we need an unintentional killing of another human being, we need a gross deviation, not just a deviation, we need a gross deviation. This is something more than what is required when we're thinking about tort negligence. Right? And if we keep moving past on our spectrum, right, we keep going up the spectrum, we know eventually we get to depraved heart murder, right? This was one of our mental states for malice aforethought that can get us to common law murder, right? Not involuntary manslaughter. We get all the way up to murder, right? Depraved heart murder. When somebody is so negligent, right, we can say that they're actually acting with a reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life, right? When a person gets that far down the spectrum and it results, right, that conduct results in the killing of another human being, they can actually be liable for murder. We say at common law, that's malice aforethought. That's common law murder, right? We call it depraved heart murder, right? So what's the difference if we're thinking, from tort negligence to criminal negligence? It's really just a more form of gross deviation from the standard of care reasonable people would exercise in the same situation. How do we get from criminal negligence, involuntary manslaughter, to depraved heart murder, reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life? Maybe the most common distinction that's made between these two, right? The reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life, which is depraved heart murder, and criminal negligence for involuntary manslaughter is the actor's awareness of risk, right? The more aware of the riskiness of the conduct the actor is, the more likely we're going to say that's depraved heart murder. That's where it starts to look like reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life. Where a person basically says, I understand the risk here, I'm going to do it anyway, right? And then somebody dies. That's where we're saying, this is reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life. That's depraved heart murder. Where an actor is unconscious of the risk or unaware of the risk, right? That's where it's more looking like involuntary manslaughter, criminal negligence. Right, maybe the most obvious example of this, the easiest example to see this, would be a gun shooting, right? And one example, the person knows the gun is loaded and decides to shoot it. And the other example, the person does not know the gun is loaded, but probably should have known the gun is loaded, right? So say that we have a person, right? He's got a gun and he removes all the bullets from the gun, right? Or at least he thinks he's removed all the bullets from the gun. He takes all the bullets out, or he tries to take all the bullets out. So he thinks 100% in his head he has an unloaded gun, right? And then to go play a joke on his friend, right? He thinks maybe there's a blank in there, there's not a real bullet, right? He points the gun at his friend and pulls the trigger. Of course, there's actually a real bullet in the gun and it shoots his friend and the friend dies, right? In that example, we would say that our shooter, right, the defendant, was probably unaware of the risk that he was taking. When he pulled that trigger, he wasn't conscious of the risk that he was taking. He thought the gun was empty, right? That might be more indicative of criminal negligence, involuntary manslaughter. If we compare that to a situation where a person knows the gun is loaded, say the exact same fact pattern, but this time the friend knows that there's a bullet in the gun, right? And his plan is, look, I want to play a joke on my friend. I'm not actually going to shoot him. I'm just going to shoot this right above his head, though. I'm going to miss him. I'm going to shoot it above his head, though, just to try to scare him. Of course, he misses. He aims too low, shoots his friend in the head, and he dies. Right, that's where we'd say, okay, this is starting to become reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk. That's where we get to depraved heart murder. Right, you knew the gun was loaded. You're pointing a loaded gun at your friend's head, right, and pulling the trigger. You knew the risk and you did it anyways, right? That's where we get to, you're just indifferent to human life. Reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk, right? That's where we get to depraved heart murder. Of course, as always with this stuff, it's a totality of the circumstance analysis, right? There are no bright line rules, but probably when you look at the case law, one of the big distinctions that's made between criminal negligence and reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life is the awareness of the risk. Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.